The United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly, morally wrong. 40 years, hundreds of men betrayed, along with their wives and children, and the larger African American community. What the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry.
The 40-year-long Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male saw the Public Health Service systematically deny treatment to 399 poor syphilitic African American men, all in the name of scientific inquiry. This injustice cost hundreds their health, sanity, and lives, and cost thousands more their trust in government and public health. However, exposure of this tragedy wrought the triumph of medical reform, which now requires the informed consent of all who participate in medical research, hopefully ensuring that the tragedy of Tuskegee is never repeated. This is Macon County, Alabama, circa 1930. Although slavery was made illegal by the 13th Amendment in 1865, Macon County remained one of its living legacies. The county was made up of poor sharecroppers, tenant farmers who were legally not slaves, but were hardly freer than their enslaved ancestors. Lack of education made upward social mobility near impossible, and 1 in 5 black adults could not read. 5 in 6 residents were black, and syphilis, among other diseases, was endemic to this population. By 1929, 36% of Macon County had syphilis. This remarkably high incidence of syphilis inspired sympathy from both the Public Health Service, a division of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and the Rosenwald Fund, a charitable organization. They began to fund a syphilis treatment program in 1929. However, syphilis treatment at this time was incredibly primitive and required a full year of costly chemotherapy in order to be effective. Ineffective treatment, coupled with the onset of the Great Depression, ended the program as it was barely beginning. In 1932, the treatment program was terminated, leaving Macon County still syphilitic, still malnourished, and still helpless. Although money for treatment ran dry, one Public Health Service doctor still saw opportunity in Macon County. Dr. Tellifer Clark decided that if they could not treat the men, they could study them untreated, learning much about syphilis in the process. He intended to withhold treatment from hundreds of African American men in hopes to study the effects of untreated syphilis as it wrought havoc on their bodies and disintegrated their minds. By late 1932, Dr. Clark had constructed an experimental group of 399 poor black men in Macon County, and so began the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. The study, at its outset, aimed to withhold effective treatment from the men for 6 to 8 months. The men of Macon County were deliberately lied to in order to convince them to enlist in the study. Although they received no effective treatment for their syphilis, they were constantly reassured that they were being treated for bad blood. This euphemistic and general term prevented the men from understanding what was truly happening to them.
I never could understand what it was all about. No more, she said it was a nice program. You know, like colored people, when something come around and think you go help them, a lot of them would jump into it. But we were young, I didn't know what it was all about. So
Ernest Hendon was just one of hundreds of men deceived by the lies of his seemingly trustworthy government doctors. Later, to conclude the study, Dr. Clark wanted to conduct a spinal tap on the men to observe how syphilis had affected their nervous systems. This spinal tap involved stabbing the men with a thick needle deep into their spinal cords to extract spinal fluid. Dr. Clark knew that this process would be excruciatingly painful and did everything in his power to ensure that men participated anyway. He advertised his spinal taps with a blatant lie, distributing a letter which said,
"Remember, this is your last chance for a special free treatment."
The spinal taps were neither special nor treatment. They left many men paralyzed or debilitated with agonizing pain for weeks afterward. Although the Tuskegee syphilis study was supposed to end after 6 to 8 months, the new director of the program, Dr. Raymond Vonderlehr, had different plans. He wanted to continue the study until each syphilitic man had died, conducting a thorough autopsy to see exactly how syphilis had ravaged their body. Thus, a 6 to 8 month study became one that would last 40 years, during which hundreds of study participants would die untreated. Many measures were taken to ensure the men of Macon County would never receive treatment. Every private physician in the area was contacted and personally instructed to not treat the syphilitic men. Not one of them objected. Doctors regularly gave the men useless aspirin to maintain the illusion of treatment, claiming that the drug cured their bad blood. The men were exceedingly and heartbreakingly thankful for this supposed treatment. They would often bring cornbread or cookies from home to personally thank their government doctors. They had no idea that they were growing sicker by the day. As the study progressed, syphilis treatment grew more accessible by the year. Yet each new advance in medicine was met with a public health service ploy, ensuring the men would never be treated. When the Rosenwald Fund resumed their free treatment programs in 1939, the Public Health Service assigned their very own nurse to the facility. She ensured no men involved in the study would be treated there. When the U.S. military attempted to treat 251 potential draftees involved in the study in 1941, their efforts were systematically shut down by the Public Health Service. Again, no men received treatment. In 1943, penicillin was found to cure syphilis. The once year-long, expensive, and potentially dangerous treatment cycle of syphilis was now reduced to a single week of affordable, safe, and easy treatment. Again, John R. Heller, the director of the study, chooses not to treat the men.
So when I asked him about penicillin, his answer was no. We didn't consider giving the men penicillin. No. So I said, well, at the risk of belaboring the obvious, why not? He said, well, it would have been in the experiment. So there you go.
It was important. They were supposedly untreated, and it would be undesirable to go ahead and use large amounts of penicillin to treat the disease because you'd interfere with the study.
Again and again, the doctors valued saving the study over saving hundreds of men's lives. When the Nuremberg trials in 1945 exposed the medical atrocities committed by Nazi scientists, the scientists of the Public Health Service failed to see a connection between their own study and that which had occurred an ocean away. The Nuremberg Code passed there, which called for voluntary consent and sufficient knowledge to make an understanding decision, was all but ignored, seen as a code for barbarians and not for civilized Americans.
The trouble with Nuremberg is that it's so tied to the Nazi experimentation that unless you're basically picking up black people and sticking them in a concentration camp and then killing them at the end, Nuremberg doesn't seem to be applicable to you. And that's how they saw it. Remember, this is the greatest generation and we won the war, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't do things like that. Only those bad people in Germany do things like that.
It seemed that with enough time and momentum, nothing would stop the study. Despite being beholden to the federal government, the Public Health Service operated outside of the law, continuing to commit grave violations of human rights and allowing men to rot away, as syphilis killed and incapacitated more and more victims. It seemed that the study was destined to continue until its last victim had died. After 40 years of syphilis-related suffering, countless cases of debilitating arthritis, stabbing ulcers, and mind-disintegrating dementia, after nearly 100 syphilis-related deaths, infection of participants' wives, and the children born to them, after 40 years of blatant disrespect, lying, and deception by the Public Health Service, the study was exposed. Whistleblower Peter Buxton relayed details of the study to the press, who broke the story on July 25, 1972. Despite the indisputable tragedy that Buxton exposed, we can find triumph in the regulations it wrought. The National Research Act, created in response to Tuskegee, now requires the written consent of anyone in any medical experiment, hopefully putting an end to this type of inhumane human research. The U.S. government has also paid all study participants, as well as their families, for their losses. In spite of these triumphs, the study has had long-lasting repercussions, permanently damaging African American trust in medicine, as found by Alsen and Wanamaker. This mistrust is not unfounded. The study was not perpetrated by mad scientists in an isolated laboratory or basement. The men in charge went on to disturbing levels of success in public health departments nationwide. We must learn from Tuskegee that simply being American does not exempt us from human rights atrocities, nor does it protect us from these same horrific acts. It is too easy to separate ourselves from the injustice of the past, but Tuskegee serves as a haunting reminder that this past is not so far away, and we are perhaps never as safe nor as far from it as we care to think.